I'm coming to you from beautiful southern Indiana, where it has been raining for several days straight. So I thought this would be a great time to talk to you about how to make a fire if you didn't bring enough materials along. Let's say the scenario is you just got into camp, everybody's hungry, you're trying to get camp set up, you've got to get a fire, and it's wet like it is right now. Really wet. So you don't have enough tinder, you don't have any kindling. All you have are the items on your person. So the early 20th century person would probably have a couple of resources at his disposal. Some of those resources would be a box of matches, possibly an early lighter similar to your Bic lighters nowadays, or Zippos. This is kind of the same idea. These were called trench lighters and they came out after World War I. So if you're doing, or in World War I, so if you're doing a pre-war impression, you don't want to use one of these. But let's say we're doing a post-war impression, hence the hat. This is Army surplus. So these are things you might have on your person. Old candle stubs are indispensable. I highly recommend carrying one in your jacket pocket at all times. You never know when you might need it. All right, so those are the basic things that pretty much anybody should have, even in their pocket as they're going out to camp. If they're really resourceful, they might have the old tried and true flint and steel kit. This has been the way to make a fire for centuries. And so we're going to show you how to do that as well. But even if you don't have that, we'll talk about these basics that would have been camp conveniences in the early 20th century, but certainly indispensable and anyone would have had them. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find some tinder and some kindling. And that's what we're going to do right now. So now we've found what we're looking for. This is an old dead cedar tree. And if you live anywhere in the Midwestern United States, there will be one of these probably within 100 yards of wherever you're camping. Especially along wood lines, the edges of fields, things like that. They're an understory tree usually, so look for something like this, preferably a dead one. It's going to give you the best results, and you're not going to harm a tree because it's already dead. So what we want is we want to peel off this bark that's just hanging in strips. Even after a rainstorm, you'll be able to find cedar bark that is dry. And it should just peel off like this, especially when it's old and dead. So we want to grab a pretty good sized handful of it. Be liberal with your resources here, because the more tinder you have, the better your chances of getting a fire started. Now while you're at it, grab some of these little dry branches. These will make excellent kindling and fire starter. And again, this tree is dead, so we're not hurting anything here. All right, I think we have enough to get started with. Let's see what we can do. Now you're also gonna want some good stuff to get started with after you get your tinder lit. So if you can find a brush pile, maybe where a tree is downed or where some critters have built up some brush, look for, first off, the branches that are on top. They're gonna be a little damp, but the ones that have been up in the air are gonna be better. The other thing you can do is you can dig down underneath the brush. Watch for other wild animals and snakes and things. If it's warm weather, there could be snakes out. So before you stick your hands in a brush pile, look where you're going. But if you get down underneath, a lot of times you'll find drier wood down in the bottom. So we'll gather up some of that as well, so that we have that to go with our kindling. Okay, so we have all of our resources gathered up. We've got our cedar bark for tinder. We've got some little cedar branches for small kindling. We've got some dry sticks for larger kindling. And then we've got our fire starter supplies. So if we're fortunate, we might be in a situation where someone else has camped before us in the same place. And so there may be some leftover charcoal from a previous fire. This is not going to do us much good because this stuff is sopping wet. But if it's dry, certainly use it as the base before you build your fire, because those will catch as coals a lot faster. So these aren't going to do us a bunch of good right now, so we're going to move them out of the way. Now the first thing you want to do is you want to break up your larger sticks, and you want to build a teepee with them. And it really helps that our ground is so wet, because we can actually stick these in the ground. Use the pointy end. And just getting a few of them stuck in the ground is enough to hold the whole thing together. And when you're building this, you want to build all the way around, but you want to leave an area where you can get fire in underneath of it all. Now before we get too carried away on all this bigger stuff, we've got our framework. We're going to go ahead and put this little bit of cedar in there, because that stuff is going to take off a lot better. This is good and dry, and being in the fir family, it's got a little bit of natural turpentine in it, which makes it take off even faster. If you are going out camping and you're expecting wet weather, I highly recommend making sure that you do bring some dry kindling along and some tinder, and also a broad brim hat. That will do the duty of keeping the rain off, but also you'll want it to fan your fire with. Alright, so the next step is to prepare the tinder. So this is all that cedar bark that we grabbed earlier. And what we want to do is we want to crunch it up and roll it around, kind of shred it apart. The idea is to make it as fine and fibrous as you possibly can. Now we're going to split this, because you should always be prepared for the possibility that your fire doesn't take off the first time. And if you only have limited supplies, don't use it all in one go. So what you want to do is try to make the closest approximation to a bird's nest as you possibly can. Coincidentally, used vacated bird's nests also work very well for tinder, but make sure you use one that's not occupied. This time of year they're mostly occupied. Alright, so we have our tinder. Now we need some heat. So we're going to start off with the old tried and true flint and steel kit. Now in a flint and steel kit, you'll have your steel, a piece of flint. Together, those make sparks. And then the most important part is to have a little tin with some char cloth in it. Char cloth is any natural fiber cloth. Cotton and linen works really well. Don't use wool. And you put it in the tin, and then put the tin on a bed of coals and just let it sit there and smolder until all of the fabric inside is charred up like charcoal, except it's cloth. This stuff will catch those little sparks and you'll get a fire going. Now what I like to do is everybody's got a different technique on this, but what I like to do is I like to mash that cloth a little bit. It kind of breaks the fibers some, and I think it makes it catch the spark easier. And then we'll lay that in the middle of our tinder. This is where the candle comes in. Pull the wick out, make sure it's ready to go. Have that candle stub handy. First thing you want to do when you get fire is light that candle, because the candle will stay going even after your char cloth or your match or even your lighter fail to work. So we'll keep that candle handy. There we go. Sometimes it takes a little while, but eventually you'll catch it. There we have a little bit going. So we want to keep that going. Turn it upside down and blow from underneath. Okay, well that takes some practice. I'm a little out of practice. So we'll use some of the modern early 20th century resources. So we're going to take that tinder and we're just going to put it up underneath our little pile of sticks here. I'm going to throw a few more right on top of it. Make sure we've got something that'll really catch. And again, I've still left an access in my teepee so I can get up underneath with the flame. So we have a couple of things we can do here. We can use this guy right here, light your candle, and if you've got a pocket full of various candle stubs, you can just put this whole candle in there. All that wax will start to burn and it'll really do a good job of taking off. Now we also have the option of matches. I'm afraid my boots are too muddy to strike it off on the boot. Well, these may be a little damp. And that's why you have backups. Well, our matches have failed us too. It's a good thing we've thought to bring extras. So here's 3 forms of fire, 3 ways that I could have made a fire. Only one of them is going to work tonight because it's so wet. Now I could have had a match safe that I kept my matches in that would have kept them dry. That would have made a big difference. Again, it's all about proper preparation. So we want to get that flame right up underneath of our cedar tinder. And even the cedar bark is so wet just from the general humidity that it's not wanting to burn very well at all. That's probably why I couldn't get it going with my flint and steel earlier. It's got flame right in it. It's just barely trying to go. But it's gonna go. As that starts to dry out a little bit, it'll take off. What you don't want to do is you don't want to take your eyes off of it at this point. Right now is the critical moment, and it can go out that quick. So you want to keep your eyes on it. Make sure that you're not ignoring something, letting it die down to nothing. Now I can see there's embers starting to glow underneath there, so we can give it a little more air. There we go. And it doesn't hurt to gather more of your tinder than you need and store some of that away for the morning, because chances are your fire will go out overnight, and so you may need to start it up for breakfast in the morning. And so keeping another fire's worth of dry tinder handy won't hurt. What I also recommend doing when the conditions are like they are today is just set that not close enough that it's going to catch fire, but set it near your fire so that as that burns, it also slowly dries out the tinder a little bit more. Now you want to put it away before your fire gets too big, or it will catch fire and burn, and then you'll be out of luck. But the more you can get this dried out, the better off you're going to be in the morning. So we'll keep a little bit of this for our morning meal. And we're just gonna keep nursing this fire until we've got enough coals to make our supper on. Having a good fire increases your chance of survival. It's very important. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. We'll be doing a lot more in the future, and we hope to see you again soon.